Hello, welcome to this brief video explaining different exam techniques for Unit 3 GCSE Business Studies. In my Google Drive area, I've got a folder which I really want you to make the most of. I've separated them into different units. They're full of exam papers, mark schemes, examiner reports, but you'll also find there's lesson slides and lots of general revision activities for you. In each of the units, I've put some other folders in with all the exam papers. I've also put an A-star exemplar that you might want to work through. And in that, for example, Leaf Studio students, this is the mock that you've recently sat. You can look through someone else's work to see how they got maximum grades. Please make the most of that. It's really useful. So this video then, basically it's on exam technique. And what I'll do every now and then, I'm going to pause the video and ask you to read the slide rather than me reading it out. If you look on the right hand side, there's a little red dot flashing. When the red dot is flashing, that's when I'm talking. When I'm not talking, I'll suggest that you'll pause the screen and make some notes or read through the screen yourself. So keep an eye on that red dot on the right hand side. Generally speaking, in your answers, remember to think pink. Remember to talk about the types of products. Be specific about the types of products that are being sold. For example, it might be hotel rooms, or it might be airplane seats, or it might be burgers, or it could be anything. But it has to be obviously in context to the business case that you're looking at. Refer where possible about the industry that the business is in. So Travelodge is in the hotel industry. Ryanair is in the airline industry. Use the name of the business. If it's a question about Starbucks, write about Starbucks. Write about its rivals, Costa, Cafe Nero, for example. And instead of using the word customers continuously, try and be a bit more precise about what type of customers they are. Are they coffee lovers? Are they diners? Are they guests, for example? And wherever you see this little stamp example, that's where I have an example of a past paper question that someone's done that's been marked, and they've either got full marks or they've had very high scores. So it will show you the sort of thing that the examiners are looking for. Now, I've gone through all the past papers, and I predict that the paper that you sit this year will most likely have a one 10 marker, 2 8 markers, 2 6 markers. There may very well be a 4 marker. There's probably going to be around about 9 or 10 3 markers. Again, 9 or 10 2 markers, and quite a few 1 markers as well. And I'm going to lead you through the command words for each of these and the types of questions and answers that you can expect to receive when you actually sit your exam. So first of all, I'm going to ask that you pause this screen and look through these command words. Okay, now you've had a chance to look at those. When we look at the excuse me, when we look at the 6, 8 and 10 marks, what we are looking for here is balance in your argument. The pros, the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages, the benefits, the drawbacks. So you're giving a really rounded view of your answer, and also you will be asked for your opinion. So you may very well want to use the words "in my opinion" or "my conclusion," something like that. So the examiner will want to know your opinion about what you have just analysed. The questions that have fewer marks, for example, the 2 and 3 markers, they're not asking for any opinions, they're just asking you to explain something. So first of all, let's look at the 1 markers. Pause the screen, have a look at this, these examples of the command terms and these examples of typical questions for 1 mark. So for 1 markers, you're not looking at too much detail. It could be it's a multiple choice where you have to say which one of the following, or it could be that you're just listing or identifying something. No detail needed, just 1 or 2 few words will be enough. Don't waste time writing lots of sentences. Now for the 2 markers. Again, I'd like you to pause the screen, read through the command terms, and read through some typical questions using these command terms. Okay, so for 2-mark responses, if you are asked to what is meant by, what they're asking you for is a definition. If it's for 2 marks, of course, it will need two parts, and I've got some examples in a minute of some answers that gained 2 marks. Or it could be that you're asked to identify, state, outline, calculate. Again, all you need is a brief response. So here's a typical 2-mark question and a 2-mark answer. Outline one way in which a business might extend the life cycle of a product. Pause the screen, read through the student's answer that gained them a full 2 marks. Here's another 2-marker. This one, what is meant by the term quality control? Now we're working on to the 3 markers. Again, pause the screen, look at the command terms on the left-hand side, and look to see how these command terms are used in 3-mark questions. Here are some more 3-mark command terms and typical 3-mark questions. So, for 3-mark responses, it could be that you're asked to outline one, explain one, or describe why, etc. For this, what you need to do is make your point and expand on it twice, using, preferably, the BLT if you can do it, because, leading to, therefore. You can use other connectives, of course, such as, which means, therefore, such as, any of those. But the main thing is you make your point and you expand on that single point 2 more times. If you are asked to outline 3, that's where you are asked to actually name 3 different things. If you're asked to calculate, for 3 marks, remember to show your working and your formula. Now let's look at this question for 3 marks. Explain one reason why a business might collect market research information. So it's one reason with 2 strands. Pause the screen and read through what the student wrote, and then you can see how they attained 3 whole marks for this answer. Now in this question, this is a 3-marker, but you'll notice this one is about a particular business. In this case, it's Starbucks. It's asking you to explain one possible disadvantage to Starbucks of not behaving in an ethical way, and it's giving you a scenario above it saying, in 2012, Starbucks was accused by the pressure group UK Uncut of finding legal ways of paying less tax to the UK government. UK Uncut argued that Starbucks was not behaving in an ethical way. I want you to pause the screen and have a look through and see where you see they've made their point and how they've made 2 further links that relate to that point, but they have also put it into context. So they're talking about the name of the business, the industry it's in, name of their rivals, etc. Now we're moving on to 4 markers. Describe. So for 4 marks, it might be describe the effects, describe how, describe why. And you'll see here on the right-hand side there are 3 questions to show how the describe word is used within those questions. Pause the screen, have a read, and then we'll look at some typical answers. So for your 4-mark response, what you could do is you can make 4 separate points, but referring to your pink throughout. Or it could be that you make 2 points, and each of those points are linked with the because leads to therefore. So 2 points in more detail. Again, you need to be using that pink. Let's have a look at this example here for 4 marks. Soap and Glory uses high levels of promotion to maintain its competitiveness. Describe how high levels of promotion could have a negative impact on Soap and Glory. Pause the screen and see how that they have referred to the business, they've referred to the rivals, etc., and see how they gained 4 marks for this. You'll see in this answer, they're saying basically they're going to be spending more on promotion, which means they got less to spend elsewhere, which means that it's hard for them to improve their product, which customers may very well be less reluctant to buy. And it might be that their competitors, L'Oreal, will gain competitive advantage there. Now we're going to look at 6 markers. With 6 markers, it could be that you're given options of option 1, option 2, and you have to, excuse my, sorry, a little pop-up came up on my phone then. So it could be that you get 2 options and you have to choose which is the best option, but you have to justify it. So here we've got 2 examples of questions. So one is option 1, option 2, and then the other question on the right hand side, they give you the 2 options and they say which of these methods is best. Or it could be for a 6 marker you get discuss. So what I suggest is if you pause this video, have a look at these discuss questions. Okay, so when we're looking at discuss, it really is looking at the positives and the negatives, the advantages and the disadvantages, the benefits, the drawbacks. So 6 mark responses then. So if you get one which is asking you which would be the most effective, i.e. option 1, option 2, what you could do is you could read through the case study and think, right, in my heart I think it's option 1 is, well, whichever option obviously you think it is. But let's say it's option 1 and you think, right, I think it's option 1. And you're going to use your BLT technique to explain why you think it's option 1. So you'll choose a positive. You'll say it's a positive because leads to therefore. And then to show balance, you could say because with option 2, and you could focus on one of the negatives of option 2. So you could say a negative of doing the other option is because leading to therefore. And this means that you showed the examiner that you've looked at the advantages and the disadvantages of the options. Now what the examiner is also looking for is your opinion, of course. So you need to have a conclusion. You need to say, in my opinion, option 1 is the best option. And then you could repeat it because blah, blah, blah. With a 6 mark question that asks you to discuss, instead of them giving you 2 options, what they're asking you to do is actually use a similar technique where you've got because leading to therefore, and you're talking about one advantage, one disadvantage. So it's a similar technique, but instead of them giving you the 2 options, it's for you to consider the 2 options. So you're going to be using this BLT technique, you're going to be making a comparison, and of course you're still going to be using your Think Pink approach to answering the question. So let's have a look. We've got this question here. This question for 6 marks, it's giving you a scenario and it's giving you 2 options and it's asking you to think which is the best option and for you to justify your answer. Pause the screen and have a look through the question. Right, now let's have a look at what one student put for their answer. Before we actually read the words in lots of detail, I want you to see that they've actually got 3 paragraphs. One, which is a pro, one paragraph, which is like the balance, and then you've got a final conclusion at the bottom. So read through, pause the screen and read through what the student has written. But I want you to remember at all times it's balanced. It's saying what's good, what's not so good, and then the student's opinion at the bottom. Unless they give their opinion at the bottom, you will not score 6 marks. And also, if you do not refer to the business, in this case it is Starbucks, if you do not refer to Starbucks and its rivals in the industry, if you don't think pink, doesn't matter how good your answer is, you cannot score more than 3 marks because you have not put it into context. Pause the screen and read through this answer. Right, so that's for 6 marks, that's option 1 or option 2. Now, for 6 marks, you might get asked to discuss. This is not where they give you 2 options. This is where you are expected to come up with the pros and cons of a particular scenario. So for 6 marks, again here, looking at what the student wrote, the student's got their conclusion at the bottom. In the middle is where they've got their analysis, they've got their pros and cons. Beautifully at the top, they've actually explained what share capital is, because it's a nice little introduction to let the examiner know that the student knows what share capital is. So have a read through this and you will see how they are giving pros and cons and their opinion at the end. Right, now for 8 marker. For an 8 marker, it could be one of 2 things. One, it could be where they say, okay, give 2, and it could be advantages, or 2 disadvantages, and explain each one. So where they're asking you to give 2 things and extend on each of those things. So for example, on the left-hand side, they're looking at just-in-time stock management. And it's asking you to state 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage and then explain each. And on the right hand side, it's just saying give 2 advantages. So it's looking for 2 disadvantages. It's looking for 2 disadvantages and its explanation of each. So pause the screen and have a look through the wording of these questions that use these 8 marker where you have to give 2 of something and explain them further. Or it could be for an 8 marker, they ask you just to assess something. So what assess will be is for you to say to the examiner, okay, on one hand, this is good because XYZ. However, on the other hand, the drawbacks are because leads to therefore. So it's looking for a balanced answer. You will need to give your opinion at the end of it. Pause the screen and read through these questions that are using the command word assess. Okay, so for an 8 mark response, basically it could be a question where it's saying give 2 and explain. So it's in 2 parts. What you will need then is to give your, for example, it might be advantage, and then you're using because leads to therefore. And then it could be disadvantage, because leads to therefore. Try not just to repeat your point. If you've done in your first point perhaps an advantage of, when you go to do your second point, don't just do the reverse wording of your first point. Make it a very separate point. Use your pink at all times. Or it could be that your 8 mark question is the word assess, to assess something. You need to have 2 things that you're going to look at, the pro, the con. And again, it's using this BLT, because leads to therefore. So 1 advantage could be because leads to therefore. However, disadvantage of that could be because leads to therefore. So what we're looking at for here is in balance, the pros and cons. Now it could be that you use a nice little phrase saying, however, it depends on, in the short term, if the business wants to, for example, increase sales, they may wish to do this. However, in the long term, and you can use that expression, it's a nice expression to use that can help you phrase your answers. Don't forget to put a conclusion and use your pink all the way through. Now for 8 mark questions, you are also marked for errors in spelling and punctuation and your phrasing as well. So you're not just marked on your knowledge, you're also marked on your writing skills. Here's an example of an 8 marker. So I'll read the question to you and then I'll leave it for you to pause the screen and read through the answer. But what I will say here is they have got, you can see just by looking at it, they've got a paragraph that says, that talks about the advantages, and then they've got another paragraph that talks about the disadvantages, and then at the bottom they've got their opinion, their overall belief of what is the best method to be used. So have a read through this screen. Sorry, have a read through this. The question is, Elvis and Cress hold buffer stocks of raw materials such as waste fire hoses. Assess the benefits to Elvis and Cress of holding large stocks of raw materials. This student got 7 marks out of 8. I think they could possibly have got an 8 out of 8 if their conclusion was just a little bit stronger. But pause the screen and read through the answer and see what you think. And finally, we're looking at the 10 markers. This is where you have to, again, it's like an 8 marker, look at the balance, the pros and the cons, but you are given an extra 2 minutes for this, so they're looking for more depth, more detail. 10 markers, often the command words will say something like using your knowledge of the business, assess the extent, or assess the importance, or assess whether, or it could be discuss. So because it's got these words, using your knowledge of business, it's asking you to think of all the things you know about everything you've learned in GCSE business can come into this answer. It could be that you're crossing over to other other topics. It could be that the question might be based on, for example, something like stock control, and you might want to bring in a little bit of the 4 Ps as well, for example. So it just demonstrates that you've got more knowledge of the whole syllabus than just what this answer is asking you to look at. So pause the screen, have a look at the command words, and have a look at typical questions that use those 10-mark command words. Okay, so for the 10-mark responses, as I say, they're similar to the 8 markers, but you use more of your business knowledge. So what you could do here is you could have 2 paragraphs, but paragraphs in more detail. So you could have, using the BLT technique, but you need more connectives, you need more detail for the examiner. So we're looking at balance here, and we want you to have a clear conclusion at the end, making a judgment. Of course, remember to use your pink all the way through, and keep an eye on your spelling and grammar and use of keywords, etc. We're going to look at a student's response to one of the questions. I'll read the question out, and then I will want you to read through the answer that they put themselves. But the question is, using your knowledge of business, assess the importance of the product to Beats Electronics when developing a competitive market mix. So before you even look at the words, you can see that they've started off discussing the topic, but in the second paragraph they've spoken about other factors, and at the bottom they've put their opinion. Now this student only got 8 out of 10. I believe they could have got more if they'd actually had a stronger conclusion at the bottom, because what they've put is overall I believe product is extremely important, but for a conclusion you really need to say because leading to therefore. Okay, so what I suggest is if you pause the screen, have a read through the answer, and then you can see how they got their 8 marks out of 10. Okay, so don't forget that in those folders I have got all the past papers in there. I've got the mark schemes, but more importantly I've got marked answers that the examiners have put there, so you can see what other students have written, and you can look to see how they got marked and how the sort of phrases that you could use to improve your grades. I hope this has been useful for you. If you have any queries, you're very welcome to email me, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.